and are using that product in some of our offerings today. So not only a great product, but a great solution for Eagle Technologies as well. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and kick it off. I have a couple folks helping me today, and I'll introduce them shortly, but they'll be assisting on the Cloudian side, both Chuck DeMars and Dave Glow, and we also have Jason Lee, who manages us from a channel perspective on the call today. So with that, let's kick it off real quick. So real quickly, for those that don't know who we are, Eagle Technologies has been around a while. We were founded in 1981, and the little pop quiz here is we've been around longer than cell phones, GPSs, Nintendo, Windows, Linux, the space shuttle, and the internet. The space shuttle actually beat us by a few months, so we can't really take that one as gospel, but it's close, and it's kind of fun to talk about anyway. In dog years, this is my engineer putting this in for 259 years, and the goal is we're going to outlast Java as a company. So for those that love Java, I'm sorry. For those that, the rest of us, nice little shout of hurrah there. So we are a core IT focused solution provider. So we work in the data centers. You guys know us as providers of primary storage, data management, those type of things. Networking and servers are also a big part. We don't advertise that as much, but we actually sell almost as many servers as we do storage arrays today from a revenue standpoint. So look at us for those type of solutions as well. The guys have become experts in that and keeping up with today's technology, which is constantly changing with composable compute now as opposed to what we're used to in the storage side of the house. DR, we talked about that a little bit. Commvault is our partner there, a go-to partner, and we'll talk about that a little bit today's webinar as well, as a good partner for Cloudian. And then just the overall data management. This next slide, I think, tells the story here a little bit, but we basically, as a company, feel like it's all about the data, and I think you guys would agree. The ones and zeros are extremely important to safeguard. And more importantly, how do we get those ones and zeros to the end user? So the Excel spreadsheets, the applications, the Word documents, et cetera, the ERP systems, the users having the access to that data is extremely key. The challenge is over time, it looks like this, right? We think it should be a straight line between the data and the user, but over time, we get kind of a convoluted environment. And that's made up of different storage platforms, different server platforms, hypervisors, applications come into play. The cloud obviously is part of the equation today, and those cloud or software as a service, infrastructure as a service, all those type of things. And what we think we do as a company really well is kind of consolidate that and give some clarity to that. There's going to be different applications that require different storage platforms, different compute requirements, those type of things. And we think we have a pretty clear vision of what that should look like, and more importantly, a simplified vision of what that should look like, so that people don't get caught up into, I need to add a lot of folks to manage this plumbing that I've created, so to speak. So the other thing that we do really well is act as your advocate. We understand the different products out there. We spend a lot of time doing research. To Chuck and Dave's chagrin on the Cloudian side, we evaluated this product extensively, and they were very, very supportive of that. They wanted us to feel comfortable with the product, and we wanted to feel comfortable with the product, not only because we're going to be a consumer of it potentially, but more importantly, if we're going to advocate that to our end users and support them after the fact, that's really key for us to have a complete understanding, know its strengths, know its weaknesses, and know where it fits in your data center. So we really feel like we're adding some value in that evaluation process for our customers, and that our customers can feel a little bit more comfortable at night knowing that not only did they look at the product and make it a fit, but they have the backing of Eagle to understand that as well. We also think and feel we do a good job of bridging the gap between what we think are cool toys and business outcomes. And understanding that language and understanding what the C-level folks want to talk about and hear is very key, because we can have really cool shiny toys, but if we can't convince what that benefit is or that business outcome benefit is for those C-level folks, we're not going to have much success in getting that deployed in your environment. And you're not going to have any success using that as a solution to an outstanding problem. So I think we do a good job of helping you translate that as well. So that's really, I just want to do a quick introduction again for those that may not have been familiar with Eagle in the past, what our go-to market is. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Chuck. Again, we're very excited about what's going on with our relationship with Cloudian. It's a new product for us, but a product that we've been looking at for 6 to 12 months, to be honest. I'll give a plug here for Commvault Go, but I was introduced to this company at Commvault Go last year, and we started that evaluation process and found a business need for it and spent a lot of time looking at that. And so that's where we came in contact with Cloudian. I will turn it over to you, Chuck and Dave, and let you introduce yourselves and your company, and welcome to the Eagle family of products, I guess.
All right. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate that. I appreciate the open. And thanks to everyone who's joined today to learn about Eagle and Cloudian. You know, Dave is not kidding. he and Adam really tested this product for a good period of time, and we are more than happy to support that because we have an extremely strong product. We've just recently kind of validated all of that goodness. We received another $94 million of funding last week. I'm sorry, 2 weeks ago now. And so we are now currently the most capitalized pure play object storage company in the market. And there's some really good reasons for that. And we're going to talk a little bit about them now. So who is Cloudian? Why do we exist? So we exist for a very particular reason. You know, we are considered data at scale, right? We are here to address the problem that is existing in every major enterprise and any company that has lots of data and data that's growing. So if you look at any large enterprise, typically 80% of that data that exists within that enterprise is unstructured, and minimally that's growing at 50% a year. That is a problem. And we are here to address that. Object storage is here to address that, and just provide everyone what boils down to two things that every CIO, CEO wants. They want to mitigate risk and they want to reduce costs. If they do those two things, they keep their job for a little longer, right? And so we do that in spades, and we're kind of the new breed, right? We integrate with a lot of the new players out there and a lot of the existing players, but at the end of the day, we are here to solve a problem, and that is data at scale. And you can, as we get into this, you'll see kind of all of the areas where that is applicable. So as I had stated, we are a software-defined storage company. We are a software company. We're not a traditional controller-based monolithic storage system. We are replacing all of them today, right? Any of them that are actually addressing unstructured data. So we call out a couple of our initial customers, and those would be NTT and Nifty. So if you're not familiar with either of those, NTT is basically the ATT of Japan, right? And Nifty is the eBay of Japan. If you're not familiar, we kind of have two corporate headquarters. We have a headquarters in San Mateo, California, and then we have a second headquarters in Tokyo. And the reason for that is because Cloudian was born out of a company called Gemini, which was the #1 messaging company in the Far East, working with a lot of large telcos. And Dave So, our CEO and co-founder, realized about 13 years ago that people started adding pictures and video and everything else to their messaging. and realized that object storage, which has been around for quite some time, was going to take off. And he made a couple of seminal decisions back then that look really easy today, but back then they were a very hard decision. One, he needed to have an API, and he decided on S3. This little company called Amazon had just started this storage service called S3, and that's now an $18 billion run rate in 11 years. So he made that decision, and then he also made a very big decision. So the day that Cloudian was announced was actually the day that the Fukushima earthquake happened, and so nobody heard about Cloudian that day. But Mike So found out very quickly that he made the right decision in using Cassandra as the best peer-to-peer architecture on the planet today, because Vodafone and other major corporations were calling him, asking him, where can we find fuel to keep our generators going? We don't have our data centers geo-dispersed, right? And Cassandra allows us to do that. So again, mitigating risk. So if you walk away from this presentation knowing two things about Cloudian, we are 100% S3 native player. What does that mean? So Amazon has the simple storage service, S3. That now is the standard for object storage. So Cloudian is in effect Amazon that you can put on customer prem. We have every enterprise feature that you would expect to see in a tier 1 storage system, only for about 70% of the cost. And we're a fully distributed architecture that really talks about that use of Cassandra and our ability to sustain multiple drive losses, multiple node losses, an entire data center going down. And as long as you have Cloudian in your second data center and you have people, you can access your data and away you go. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Dave Glow, and we will go through this. And if you want to, jump in on chat and ask some questions, we can kind of hit those after the presentation one by one, and do it that way. So I will turn it over now to Dave Glow.
Sounds good, Chuck. Thank you. So as Chuck mentioned, right, think of us as Amazon S3 being on-prem. A lot of people say, well, I don't know if I have any applications that support S3. Pretty much every day, more and more applications out there today support S3, whether you're using it or not, right? Here's a small example. You see Veritas, which is actually a Cloudian customer today. So they do all their in-house S3 development for their products on us before they introduce it into their products. Commvault is another close partner that we have lots of accounts that use us as an on-prem disk target as an alternative to using NFS or SMB. So once again, more and more companies are including S3 functionality. And the reason is because it's highly reliable and it's built to scale. So from a deployment perspective, right, all nodes are peers to each other. So what that means is that there's no metadata controllers or any moving parts or pieces that can introduce single points of failure. We start smaller than anybody else in the industry. We start with 3 nodes in a single data center. From there, you can scale to thousands of nodes. On the left here happens to be a 6-node cluster. As you can see, all nodes are peers to each other, meaning that you can connect to any one of these nodes, execute a read or a write. And because every node is running Cassandra, right, which is that underlying technology that allows us to not only scale to thousands of nodes, but be geo-distributed across multiple data centers and still be managed as a single cluster, it allows you to connect to any node, execute a read or a write, because there are copies of the metadata on every single node. That also is what makes it highly available, where in a multi-data center configuration, you could actually lose an entire data center and you still have full access to your content. So once again, highly scalable. Our tagline is that we are always on. What that means is that whether you're doing a software upgrade, a hardware upgrade, you never have to bounce the entire cluster or have an outage. If you wanted to add new hardware in with your old hardware, say 3 years from now, you want to do some lifecycle management, you could add the new nodes in with the old nodes, fail out the old nodes, and the data will automatically be migrated over to your new hardware. So you could do a rolling upgrade without having to copy or manually manipulate any data. And once again, it's built to be highly available. From a hardware perspective, right, We are based off of standard x86 based hardware. There's nothing proprietary about it. There's no InfiniBand or any other type of proprietary connections. And the formula is pretty simple. We start off with a couple of CPUs, either 64 or 128 gigs of RAM, depending on the density of the node that you choose. Some SATA drives for the object store itself. Some network ports, right, for inter-cluster communication as well as for client communication. And then we use 2 SSD drives that we mirror, that we run the OS and Cassandra on. So once again, nothing proprietary about it. We offer 2 nodes. We also support running software only. We are a software-defined company, so you could run us on HPE, Cisco, pretty much any x86-based hardware. But most customers use our appliances. And as you can see here, on the left, we have the HSA 1500. That's a 1U node, and the drive sizes will determine the capacity of each node. So anywhere from 48 all the way up to 144 terabytes per node. And then on the far right, we have the HSA 4000, and that's actually a 4U chassis that has 2 nodes. So the rules for scaling are going to be a little different with the 4000 appliance. You'd start off with 2 chassis or 4 nodes, and then you would scale in 2-node increments. And you can see here, that's more of our deep and cheap play, where you go anywhere from 560 terabytes all the way up to 840 terabytes per node. So based on the requirements that you have, if you wanted to start off in the shallow end of the pool and say, I just need a really small form factor, we can get you in with 3 of the 1500 nodes, 48 terabytes usable, right? Relatively small footprint in this day and age. Or if you said, hey, I'm coming out swinging, I need 2 petabytes today, and I will be at 4 petabytes by the end of the year, we'd guide you towards the 4000 appliance, because it's going to take a less number of nodes to get you to that usable number. You also do have the flexibility of interchanging nodes or mix and matching them. So you might start off small with the 1500s, and as your demand starts to grow, you might want to scale in larger increments. You could add in 4,000 nodes with your 1500s, so that you always have a protection on your investment when you're with Cloudian. So let's talk a little bit about how we could be deployed. So as we mentioned, we are highly available, highly scalable. And obviously, the more data centers we are deployed in, the more availability you'll have. So far left-hand side, single data center, single region, right? So this is deploying. You can start off with as little as 3 nodes. This happens to be a 5-node cluster in a single data center with a replication factor of 3 for an object called foo. So in other words, we have 3 mirrored copies of this object foo. Highly available in the sense that you could lose a node or a drive or both, and you still have access to your data. But unfortunately, if your WAN link goes down, if your data center goes down, you're going to have some data unavailability until you address that. So just moving over to the center diagram, you see multi-data center, single region. So now this is a single cluster, managed from a single pane of glass, but it happens to be a 10-node cluster, right? 5 nodes in DC1, 5 nodes in DC2, with a replication factor of 5, where they've chosen to store 3 copies in DC1 and 2 copies in DC2. So, this is where you can get highly creative as to how you protect your data. Everything is protected at the bucket level. If you're not familiar with bucket level, what that is that's a term that AWS S3 came up with, right? There's no volumes or LUNs when you're talking about object storage. It's a flat file system, so you create a bucket. You assign a data protection scheme to that bucket, and then you allow users access to it, right? So this one happens to be a bucket with an RF of 5. We support both erasure coding and replication, right? Erasure coding is going to give you a higher usable amount of data or space. Replication factor obviously will give you a higher level of copies, right? You have the flexibility of saying, maybe I want to create a bucket that's only going to exist in DC1, and I want 3 copies there. I don't want any of that data to travel to DC2. Simple enough to do. You might, in a Commvault world, what they typically do is they create a bucket in DC1. The data gets written there, and then Cloudian would then replicate that over to DC2. So we eliminate the need for Commvault to have to write a primary copy and a secondary copy. And if Commvault has to fail over and look at that second copy in DC2, it still believes that it's looking at primary copy of data. So, we add value to solutions such as Commvault by increasing availability and also offloading features and functionalities that, the backup software would traditionally do. And then if we look over here to the far right, you see multi-data center, multi-region. So this is actually two separate clusters. And the whole concept here is if you needed to stand up a second independent cluster with a second copy of your data, you would do it in a multi-data center, multi-region deployment. When you do a multi-region deployment, we enable versioning, which is an AWS 3 feature, similar to snapshots for objects, so that every time an object is modified, it'll keep track of a previous version. Both the object itself and its previous versions are replicated over to that second cluster, but the deletes are not. So if somebody accidentally deletes that object foo in DC1, you could always go back to DC2 and get a second copy. So as you can see here, you have a high level of flexibility into the ways you could deploy Cloudian. You could start off small in a single data center, grow into a multi-data center, single region. And then you could also go to multi-data center, multi-region. Worth mentioning, that second data center in DC2 could be Cloudian, but it doesn't have to. It could also be any one of the public clouds that we could replicate to. So just segueing into that, right? So we are an on-prem object storage device that utilizes the S3 API, right? So there's a lot of advantages there that Chuck mentioned earlier, right? Lower cost of acquisition. There's no in-out charges. You control everything and it's on your own network. But there are some customers that say, well, my company has a policy, wants me to be able to go to a public cloud just as a second backup measure. We can get you to any one of the 3 public clouds that are out there, AWS, GCP, or Azure. I'm not aware of anybody else that could do all 3 other than us. Azure itself doesn't support S3. They have their own unique Azure API. So we could act as a gateway and take the data that is stored on Cloudian as an S3 object and convert it into native Azure blob format, tear it up to Azure, at which point then a customer may choose to run some native Azure API calls against it. So, once again, the key here is zero lock-in when you're on our platform. We're never going to force you to go to any public cloud. You don't have to go to public cloud if you don't want to. But once again, the key here is we can get you to any public cloud you want to be in. So another area where Cloudian is being used is also for, think of it as like an HSM or archive platform. So, there's a lot of enterprise filers out there, NetApp, Isilon. I'm 10 years ex-Isilon, and they have a lot of advanced features, especially when it comes to doing snapshots and other things specific to file. But there's also a price to be paid for that, right? When you're paying for support costs, you're adding additional hardware. And the majority of the time, 80% of that data is stale after 30 days or more. So what comprises the partner, or the company that we partner with, allows us to go out and scan any NFS or SMB share that's out there. It'll generate a report and say, hey, of your 2 petabytes of NFS data, 85% of it has not been touched in 30 days. What would you like to do with it? And if you so choose, Comprise can actually physically move the data off of your enterprise NAS and store it in Cloudian. Why would you want to do that? So it's a fraction of the cost compared to just growing out your existing NAS infrastructure. So what happens is that Comprise would move it, store it in Cloudian as an object. And the nice part about this is that because it doesn't utilize stubs, there's zero user interruption. So in other words, it would just follow a symbolic link to Comprise, at which point Comprise would serve off the data that's being requested. So this allows you to keep your original investment in your NAS infrastructure without having to grow it out, and utilize a lower cost of storage for an archive tier. I always like to talk about Commvault because we are an innovation partner with them. We won an award with them. There's a large service provider out in Europe, Schubert Phyllis, and I know these numbers are stale, but right now, at the time they were doing 3,800 clients backing up a day to a single Cloudian device, and you can see 3,500 backup jobs per day. So, from a scale-out architecture, right? Because each node has CPU, cache, and GigE ports. It's ideal for any type of backup targets because you could distribute the load across multiple nodes and support a large number of clients. So, we just like to say that, we partner with a lot of companies, but Commvault is definitely one that we're extremely close with. Last topic I want to talk about is Hyperfile. So What is Hyperfile? Hyperfile is a gateway that allows you to present out NFS and SMB shares to your clients while utilizing Hyperstore as its main repository. So in other words, you can deploy a Hyperfile appliance that'll have a predetermined amount of cache for your hot NFS SMB data. It lands on the Hyperfile appliance. As soon as the file is closed, it's automatically written down to Hyperstore and stored as an object. So imagine a workflow where you might have a couple gateways deployed with, say, 10 terabytes of local cache. And then behind the scenes, you have a Hyperstore deployed. It might be 500 terabytes as that main repository, right? So this allows you to just get another use case out of Hyperstore itself. It allows you to provide some basic NFS SMB services while utilizing Hyperstore on the back end as the main repository. Typical use cases we see today, are we going to go out and replace every NetApp out there today and do home directories for 10,000 users? Probably not. But we have a lot of users today where they have database logs and they just need an NFS mount point to dump an archive to. And a lot of times they don't want to have to spin up another filer just to give somebody a 10 terabyte share. This allows you to share out, NFS or SMB gateway and then utilize your existing storage platform, storing your files as S3 objects. The other thing that's very unique to this solution compared to some other vendors out there today is that once that data is indexed on the gateway and written and stored as an S3 object, it can immediately be accessed through any S3 application. So it's true by modality. In other words, any SMB NFS data that gets written and stored as an S3 object can be accessed by any S3 application out there today. Once again, very unique to the industry. And at this point, that was my last slide. So I'll hand it back to Dave.
Appreciate it, Dave. We have the Dave and Dave show today, it seems like. So I did, as Chuck mentioned earlier, and I'll reiterate, there is a chat window if you have questions. We have several people on the line right now, so we're not going to be able to open it up for audio questions. But if anybody wants to share a question via chat, we can do that now. You did mention earlier, but just to reiterate, it's kind of interesting, and one of the things that we liked about the product was how it scales. So if you can kind of go through that again, you don't have to pick and choose which platform you want to start with. Is that correct?
That is correct. So you could typically we ask a couple of simple questions, right? How much capacity you need today? How much do you think you'll be at by the end of the year? And then also a good point is, how many users do you have? These boxes, as I mentioned, you start off with 3 of them, regardless of the density. So you can start off with the small ones, the 1500s, and grow into the 4000s. You may have a relatively small footprint, say 500 terabytes, but you may have 10,000 users. In that case, you may want to use more of the 1500s. Why? Because you get more aggregate throughput. Every time you add a node, you're not only getting compute and memory and capacity, you're getting more aggregate throughput. So we can scale for throughput, capacity, or both.
Right. And then the other interesting thing, obviously, it hits on with Eagle is the relationship that you have with Commvault. And do you find your users are using Cloudian as that primary landing zone, and you get the throughput because of the node count, or do you see them using more of that long-term retention and maybe a gateway into S3 and also just again a long-term retention to replace possibly tape or some other legacy archive solution?
I would say it's both today, although the majority of our recent wins have been, somebody that needs additional primary storage. They're typically looking at some type of storage device that has an NFS mount on it. And then they look at Cloudian, and not only because of the price, but because, as you mentioned, that we could scale and deliver a high level of throughput. It winds up being a primary storage as well as a long-term archive. It's also worth mentioning, we recently did a joint Commvault tuning guide with Commvault. So their engineering team and our engineering teams contributed to it. It's on our website. And it documents pretty much everything that has to be involved in tuning your Commvault environment specific for performance.
Okay.
I see that Leah has a question out there. What key benefit do you have over your competition?
Sure. I would say the biggest key benefit that we have is our relationship with AWS S3. They're actually a partner. So we get early access to advanced features that they don't typically make available to other customers. And then the big thing really is that we are 100% native specific to the S3 API. What that means is that if you look at the S3 APIs that get published by AWS, there's roughly some 500 calls. And if you look at some vendors that are out there today that say they do object, they're typically doing some type of translation, right? And I think we all know things get lost in translation. So very simple for most companies to do a simple write or a put, right, or a get. But when you start looking at some of the advanced features such as multi-part upload, which plays a big role when you're moving big objects around, many vendors such as Rubrik or Commvault will take advantage of multi-part upload. If you're partnered or if you're using an object store that doesn't adhere to the API, you may not be able to use those advanced features. So that's the biggest deal from a customer perspective, is that you will get 100% support for every S3 API that's out there.
Anything that you can do from a storage perspective inside of Amazon, you can do on Cloudian. And we're the only ones that can say that in this market. I would take it to another level as well in the fact that we have the best multi-cloud deployment options available to the market today. Our ability to seamlessly take S3 data and stick it in Azure in its native format or Google in its native format is also fairly unique to us. And obviously not having to do extra translations and all of that makes us a faster product, right? So, when you think about performance, it typically doesn't show up in the same sentence as Cloudian, right? But if you look at performance as throughput, we'll saturate a gig E-link, a 10 gig E-link, a 40 gig E-link, whatever you give us, we'll saturate. So for performance from our perspective is all about throughput. We essentially address everything that isn't a database. And even then, with S3, you now have the ability to direct dump Oracle RMAN or SQL to us, right? Every day there is a new S3 application out there. So all of that can be put directly onto our system.
So one other request, if anybody is interested in getting that guide, that tuning guide for Commvault, or taking a look at that, just let Gail know, either through an email or she might be sending out a survey, that you would like to see that guide, and we'll definitely forward you that link to that as well. Happy to do that. And to Chuck's point, we obviously, again, we're trying to be advocates for our customers, looking for different solutions for our offerings as well. And we went down the science experiment path as well. And hands down, the Cloudian made a lot of business sense and both financial and technical sense for us, as opposed to trying to roll your own with some of the other solutions that are out there, and then falling short of, to your point, being able to integrate with other cloud solutions, S3 solutions. The deployment options and so forth were just, second to none with this product. So it was a pretty easy choice. Again, I didn't make that choice easy on Chuck and Dave, but it was an easy choice for us. So, other questions? Again, Cloudian, will you guys be exhibiting at Commvault Go again this year? Do you know your schedules yet?
Yes, this is Jason. I work on the marketing side at Cloudian. We will be presenting at Commvault Go. We'll have a booth there. If you want to reach out to Gail or anyone at the Eagle team, I can confirm booth number and things like that.
Awesome. And again, Commvault's invited us. Eagle will be presenting with one of our customers at Commvault Go, and we have quite a few customers attending. So we will be putting together an Eagle happy hour as well for that event. So we'll have the Cloudian folks there hopefully as well. So a good chance to meet the team and know more about the product. The other thing is, obviously, this is phase one. We call it the education phase. What products are out there and how can they potentially benefit you and your business? We'd definitely like to be invited out for a deeper dive. So at this point, the next steps for us is reach out to your local account executive, and they would be happy to set up an appointment and do a little deeper dive into the technology and a deeper dive into your specific needs around that technology, and happy to do that. That's part of the process for us, is to make you aware of products like this, but more importantly, make you aware of how they fit and make you comfortable with it, and make sure it is a good fit. So you must have done a good job, Dave. There is not too many questions. Other things that come up from your standpoint when you're out visiting with customers and partners that you can think of? I put you on the spot there, I know.
Sorry, I was talking on mute there for a little bit. The use cases are just abounding, right? And our ability, I think what you're going to see just kind of globally here over the next 5 to 8 years, NFS and SMB are going to be going away. And all of that data is going to end up, in an S3 format in an object store somewhere, right? It is a much better place to scale data than NFS and SMB. And so, that is going to be a big growth factor. And obviously using Hyperfile, and we also have partnerships with companies like Comprise with a K, who are data movers. So they have the ability to analyze a tier 1 NetApp or a tier 1 Isilon system, essentially, tell you, typically, if you just look at any enterprise NAS system, anywhere from 65 to 70% of the data hasn't been accessed for more than 90 days. Those are expensive units. So you have the ability with Comprise to plug in what you consider to be stale data, whether that's 90 days, 180 days, whatever it is. You plug that in, it goes and scours that Isilon system. It will find all of that data, and then it will say, do you want to tier that to Cloudian? You want to tier it from $1,200 a terabyte down to $200 a terabyte, right? And there's a symbolic link that's left, so the Isilon never breaks, continues to do some of the things that it does that we can't do, like from a performance perspective. But you don't have to grow that environment. You no longer have to buy another node for a lot of money. You can just continue to take the stale data and tier it off to Cloudian. And then once it's on us, we have the ability to take it anywhere on the planet, right? Any S3 endpoint.
Very good. I think we are out of questions at this point. Again, if you do happen to have some availability and can attend Commvault Go, it's a great event. You'll be able to meet the Cloudian folks. Eagle has a booth there doing some presentations. It sounds like Cloudian also has some presentations lined up at Commvault Go. Reach out to your account executives. Love to get some feedback on this product and do a deeper dive with you. And at this point, I think, again, I will offer up, if anybody would like to see more details, a copy of the presentation, I think this will be up on our website as a recorded event. So if somebody wasn't able to attend from your team and you'd like that, we'd be happy to share that with you as well. But just reach out to Gail and we can make all that available. With that, I appreciate it. David, Chuck, nice job. Jason, thank you for joining as well. And give you guys some of your morning back. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.